truth is indivisible. From the beginning it was partitioned. That partition must now be legitimized.
This Jewish Egyptian poet's words seem to sum up this century's longest struggle for a place to live. Two people claim birthright to the same land. That's the daily tragedy lived out by the Israelis and Palestinians. How can you share the land you occupy? In spite of Palestinian autonomy, 40% of the Gaza Strip, scarcely 360 square kilometers of sandy land, is still under Israeli occupation. Crammed into this tiny territory are 1 million Palestinians. While protected by barbed wire and guarded by the Israeli army, 5,000 Jewish settlers continue to live out their dream of a great Israel.
I opened up the dialogue and defined partition.
In the face of reality, a few men have since the 60s been trying to set up a dialogue for partition. Two of these pioneers live 20 kilometers apart, separated by the green line on the map that divides the Gaza Strip from Israel. Haider Abdel Shafi was born in 1919 in Gaza, where his family have lived for more than 300 years. From 1943, he worked in his town as a doctor. And since 1972, he's been president of the Red Crescent for the Gaza Strip. A communist fellow traveler, he's a notable domestic Palestinian figure and was chosen to head the Palestinian delegation for the peace talks in Madrid and Washington in 1991 and 1992. Yoshi Amitai was born in Tel Aviv in 1938. At the age of 18, he belonged to the left-wing Zionist Mapam Party's kibbutzim movement and took part in the voluntary collective farm adventure in a kibbutz at Gvlot in the Negev, where he still lives. He's a specialist in Arab history, which he teaches at the Beersheba University. In 1976, he was one of the founder members of the Israeli Council for Israeli-Palestinian Peace. His mother's family fled the Tsarist pogroms at the beginning of the century and settled in Palestine at the start of Zionism.
He is my enemy, and I knew him not.
Although Zionism in a way was a kind of a secular revolt against clericalism and against messianic belief that Jews shouldn't do anything, Messiah will come in proper time and will rescue the Jews, the Zionist movement meant that Jews decided to take their own fate in their own hands. Nevertheless, I believe that Zionism is also inspired by the religious past, the religious history of the Jewish people. Israel was historically the land of the Jews, I mean, the land where the Jews could fulfill themselves as a national entity.
אבנים לבנות, טוב לשוט תרמילה לשכם, אל בליען הרחק לי נדות.
The kibbutz was an essential part of the Israeli, of the Zionist dream. And indeed, you should recall that there is an excellent masterpiece about children of the kibbutz by the French sociologist Charles Bettelheim, which is called Children of Dream. Now, the kibbutz was a dream about an egalitarian society, raising children together, producing together, consuming together. A kind of a voluntary socialism, unlike the compulsory socialism which characterized the communist bloc at the time. And at the beginning, the life here was indeed very, very hard. But people lived here and suffered all kind of hardships with idealistic devotion. turning the desert into a flourishing garden, and so on. Of course, it's a part of the Zionist myth, but this is a myth that was realized, and there's something very real that was set up here. And the example of Gvulot was followed by many other kibbutzim. So Israel has set an example of how to fight the desert. Now, many Jews believe, and I think this is the internal contradiction of Zionism, that the whole idea of Zionism is a people without a land coming to a land without a people, and they ignore the fact that there was already a people there for over 1,300 years. Which is the Arab population of Palestine, which later, in a parallel process, became a distinct national entity, which are the Palestinians.
كانت لنا من زمان ضيعة جميلة وضيعة ظليلة ينام في أفيائها نساء ضيعتنا كان اسمها بيسا.
It is true that Palestinians were part of a bigger Arab nation, and but they existed on Palestinian territory, and so they had a basic right in Palestinian territory, which was violated by the Zionist program. So it doesn't. I mean, what Zionism says about Palestinians, because we looked at ourselves as the people, the inhabitants of Palestine, and we were entitled for self-determination. As a matter of fact, when Palestine was put under the British mandate in 1922, it was put under mandate category A, and that meant that we were ready to be independent, and it was actually a recognition of our right to self-determination. I don't condone the Zionist ideology at all. I think it is a racist ideology, and I think it's aggressive. It came out to support Jewish nationalism, but I think under the circumstances, it was the wrong option. I think I maybe concede the idea of Jewish nationalism, but to realize it, I think what happened was the wrong way, and we are as we are. We are entrenched in a difficult struggle. What the outcome is going to be, nobody knows. I think they could have opted for a different way of realizing Jewish nationalism by attempting to reach some understanding with the local population in Palestine. I think that would have been the better option.
On the 29th of November 1947, the United Nations decided to divide Palestine into two separate states, one Arab and the other Israeli, and placed Jerusalem itself under international control. The Jewish community accepted the plan, the Arabs refused it.
I thought under the circumstances that was the thing that was feasible, and we better accept it, because we didn't have anything that could support another option. I mean, it is true that the majority of the Palestinians rejected the partition, and I can see that was, emotionally and on the principle of defending our right to self-determination. That was all right, but practically it was useless. And so, pragmatically, I was with the minority that called for accepting the partition resolution and to see what would happen. But of course, the majority rejected partition.
Six months after the plan for partition, on the 14th of May 1948, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the establishment of the Jewish state to be known as Israel. At dawn the following day, Arab troops entered Palestine. That was the official start of the first war between Israel and Palestine.
The most troubling aspect of the war of 1948 was that actually the Palestinians, who basically are one of the two major parties, in the drama, didn't have a role in the war. The war was, in fact, the Palestinian community, because of many reasons which I shouldn't specify now, did collapse more or less at the end of 1947. That is half a year before the State of Israel was proclaimed. Yes, the Palestinian exodus started, was a result of the confrontation between two, how should we say, inordinary or semi-official armies, but the Jewish semi-official army, the army on the way, the Haganah, was better equipped and better trained and better disciplined, and there were no match for the Haganah.
You know, Israel hoped and tried after 1948 to efface the identity of Palestine. They did all their efforts within Palestine to do away with anything Palestinian. The word Palestinians were never allowed in public discourse. And certainly they hoped with the refugee situation that the Palestinians would cease to exist as a people. But of course, the Palestinian efforts were the contrary.
He who accepts a dialogue is no longer an enemy.
That day, Dr. Abdel Shafi, agreeing that the poet was right, went to meet Yoshi Amitai in East Jerusalem. Leaving Gaza, he's obliged to cross the boundary on foot at Erez, the only point of entry to the other world.
والله لو سمحت يا دكتور توصل لنا رسالة على الحالة تبعتنا هذه.
إن شاء الله.
توصل لنا رسالة على الوضع تبعنا الكويس هذا.
إن شاء الله.
Walking through this corridor, over a kilometer long, he has to pass through a series of Israeli checkpoints that for him symbolize the everlasting occupation.
Give me